Hello Gators, this is 6-6 Conditions of Special Parallelograms. I can identify rhombuses, rectangles, and squares by the characteristics of their diagonals, day 2. Let's take a look at this situation. There's two things happening with the diagonals here. One, the diagonals are perpendicular, and that tells me that officially it's a rhombus. Now this parallelogram also has diagonals are congruent, and when diagonals are congruent, we can officially say this is a rectangle. When you can identify something as a rhombus and a rectangle, what the best word to use is a square. So this is a square. Let's take a look at each parallelogram and decide if it's a rhombus, square, or rectangle. Now, this is a parallelogram, so I know diagonals are bisecting each other. So this half and this half would be the same, this half and this half would be the same. Since they're all the same tick marks, that means the diagonals are congruent. So officially, this is called a rectangle. I notice here the diagonal is bisecting the angle, so these two angles are congruent. These angles will also be congruent because opposite angles are congruent, and this is also a parallel line, so these alternate interior angles will be congruent. When this happens, this is called a rhombus. In number 1, we have opposite angles are congruent, but more than congruent, they are right angles. So we call this a rectangle. Now, this is a parallelogram with one right angle. Once we have one right angle, all of the angles will be right because these are parallel lines, and so officially we call this a rectangle. With 3 of the right angles, the 4th one has to be right in order to add up to 360. So this is called a rectangle, but with all the sides congruent, this is called a rhombus. When you can call something a rectangle and a rhombus, the best word to use is square. This figure is called a trapezoid, when you only have one pair of sides parallel. Opposite sides are congruent, which is a parallelogram, but more so, this is a rhombus. All the sides are the same. This, 2 sides are parallel, that's all. The best you can call this is a trapezoid, not an isosceles trapezoid, just a trapezoid. This, we don't really know about the sides or the angles. The best word we can use is a quadrilateral, quad. Over here, opposite sides are congruent. The best word we can use is parallelogram. We can't use any other word. Okay, so the conditions. When you know a parallelogram has the diagonals are perpendicular or bisect opposite angles, we call it a rhombus. When the diagonals are congruent, and of course they're bisecting each other, which makes it a parallelogram, then we call that a rectangle. When the figure has the parts that describe it as a rhombus and a rectangle, then we call that a square.